everybody. So I wanted to come on and I wanted to talk about something that came across my Facebook. So generally I don't necessarily subscribe to news channels in order to get their updates and things like that. Um, but there are a few times when news channels will come across my Facebook feed, and I do appreciate that. I just don't subscribe like to their apps and things like that because I don't want to be bombarded by news. I do watch the news um, and things like that, but I don't want to be bombarded by them. So sometimes, I mean, I will like a news station on Facebook, but then I put it to where I don't get all the notifications and things like that. And I most definitely do not have their apps. And I think that is a good form of self care. So, just to start this off, if you see the title of this video, it does have George Santos's name in there. I am not giving him a diagnosis because I have not sat across from him. I have not spoken to him directly. I have not done any assessments or anything like that. Um, the only thing I know is what I have heard on the news and what I have seen on the news and all of the talk about that. But I wanted to focus on something that has, because of the things that he's been doing based on his campaign and when news investigators have investigated him, the new term, there was not new, but what they're saying is that he's a pathological liar. And I have seen people make that somewhat of a mental health diagnosis. And based on my research and things like that, and one of the things that I do know is that, I'm a therapist. And again, I'm not diagnosing George Santos because I cannot do that because I haven't done any assessments with him. But the term pathological liar is not a mental health diagnosis. It is definitely not a mental health diagnosis. It's not something that you would find in the DSM-5, which is what is used to diagnose. You will find that there are other, diagnoses that can be used where a person may, become a pathological liar based on that diagnosis. That pathological liar could be one of the symptoms of that diagnosis. But I took some notes in my trusty journal. And so the article that came across my page was Brenda Goodman's article, and she works for CNN. She was talking about a book that Tim Levine wrote it called Deception in 2016. And in the book, when she interviewed him, he said that he was trying to look up in the mental health field, just get any research about pathological lying and if it has any mental health implications. And there's not a lot of research out there that's just specific to pathological lying. And I'll believe him because, again, pathological lying is not a mental health diagnosis within itself. As I was looking things up, I went to Medical News Today, and they define lying as lying is making a false statement to deceive others intentionally, often for some personal benefit, right? So the idea is that somebody says a lie to benefit themselves in some way. So it may inflate their ego. It may give them a false sense of security that now they have made themselves look better in the eyes of this other person, or they may lie to make other people feel sorry for them. There are many different reasons why a person would tell a lie. In Medical News Today, it did say that sometimes in our general everyday interactions, we tend to lie. It's not something that is done 100% of the time, but in a person's lifetime, they will lie in some way or another, whether it's lying by omission, where they leave out a detail of a story, or whether it's just telling a full out lie. And things like that. We do that generally as we are living, as we're socializing, as we're, talking with other people and different things like that. Morally, as we're growing up, in our different households and as we go to school and things like that, we learn that lying is not something that is, socially appropriate, and it's something we're told not to do. It may be also a secondary thing, maybe a religious reasons, why, a child may be told as they're growing up, hey, don't lie. And majority of the religions out there have that as one of the codes of, do not lie kind of thing. And so we've incorporated that into our society. But there are some mental health disorders that a symptom of those disorders can be lying. Personality disorders is one of the things that I found coming up a lot in my research. So people and it doesn't mean that this is going to be 100%. So nothing in this world is 100%. But a person with these personality disorders may tend to lie more often or more pathologically than others. And the definition of a pathological liar is that they are lying. Eventually, their lying becomes something where, when you look at it, there's no real motive, there's no real benefit to the person anymore. They're just continuing to lie. So the person may get in trouble for lying. It might be such a lie that it's so easy to figure out, like, okay, this person is obviously lying, but they just continue to do it because now it's like, okay, there is no benefit, so I don't see what the motive is, I don't see the reason for it, or anything like that. So there's no outward motive, there's no outward gain for the person, but they just continue to tell the lie. And so that is why people are saying George Santos, people like him, who are, embellishing their stories. Now it's like, okay, this is more pathological because there's no reason for it. Like, we can Google very easily some of this information and find out that it's not the truth. And so now there's no reason for it. But one of the disorders that came up that if you've watched any kind of medical show, if you've watched any kind of criminal justice medical show or anything like that, you would have seen, and it's Munchausen syndrome. So there's two in that category. So there's Munchausen syndrome, which is the person themselves who are lying about being sick, or they're lying about being mentally ill. So they present themselves as being physically ill, or they present themselves as being mentally ill for their own benefit, or they feel like it will benefit them in some way or another. And then there's Munchausen by proxy. If you've watched any medical show for any length of time, you've seen this one. So it is where it's usually presented in those shows as a mother brings in her child, and she says that this child is sick. And when the medical professionals look at the child's history, they've been to many, many different hospitals and with many claims of the child being sick. And then they go through a process where they realize, oh, wait, this person is deliberately trying to make their child sick so that they can bring the child to the hospital, and then the mother or the father or the caregiver of the child now gets attention because their child is sick, right? That's how it's usually presented in those medical shows. But the bottom line is that in Munchausen by proxy, the person brings in another individual and says this other individual is sick or something, or mentally ill, or something like that. There have been also famous cases that have been out there. There was a most recent famous one, and I'll do my research and I can bring that one up in another video that I do. But there was a most recent one where they discovered that for years and years and years, there was even an international scandal over it, where the child was said to have had cancer, and they had Make-A-Wish had done some things for them, and they realized that this all started from a fake thing where they wanted to use and abuse the public and get sympathy and money and things like that. There are many reasons why this can develop, where pathological lying um, or any one of these personality disorders and things like that can develop. And one of them is biological causes, so it can be inherited. So, a lot of mental health diagnosis, a lot of times when you see somebody struggling with something like that, it can be inherited, passed down through family, through genetic reasons, and things like that. So, there's a biological component. Also, there are environmental components that can affect a person, and usually it's early childhood abuse and neglect. So, early childhood abuse and neglect can lead to somebody later on developing a personality disorder, low self esteem, substance use, depression. All of those things can all be as a result of early childhood abuse or neglect or some biological components. There's ACEs, so early childhood experiences are something that has been researched and looked at closely, because what has been noticed is that if somebody has early childhood abuse or neglect, later on in their adult life, they can develop, or not necessarily only in their adult life, but as they start like becoming school age, schools and professionals can start to notice that this child is not developing well. Um, what they've noticed also is that it can lead to medical problems. And so a person that experiences early childhood abuse or neglect can also, be more predispositioned to developing, those chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart disease, and all of those different things. And so, when you notice that somebody has some kind of a personality disorder, or they have some kind of mental health concern or things like that, it's good to look at what was going on biologically for them. So, looking at family history, and then also looking at what was happening in the environment of the child. There is something known as biosocial theory, and biosocial theory is very much involved at looking at the biological history of the person and the environmental history. If you look in a good example would be to look at the way that CPS, Child Protective Services, was even formed and created. The whole premise is so that they can remove children from the experiencing abuse and neglect and put them in safer homes. Now, I won't do the CPS debate on here because there's been a lot of information that says that CPS is not working 100% as it should, and so abuse and neglect and things like that may be furthered in custody. But programs like that were developed because professionals, schools, society as a whole started to notice that when a child is abused or is living in an abusive home, or they're neglected, that they grow up. Besides the fact that that is morally wrong and they should not be experiencing that, further on in that person's life, they start to develop these kind of, chronic mental health issues, or chronic physical medical health issues. Another thing that I found was something that's called frontal temporal lobe dementia. I didn't investigate it in detail, but it is a form of dementia that affects the person's frontal lobe and temporal lobe, and both of those lobes in our brain. So, our frontal lobe, I know just from general research, is in charge of our executive functioning. So that's where we do all of our day-to-day, reasoning, our day-to-day, things that, happen. And with that form of dementia, it affects that lobe and our temporal lobe. And so it can cause, one of the symptoms, it can be, could cause the person to lie a little bit more than they would, and if eventually start to lie pathologically, and things like that. So again, pathological lying is not an actual diagnosis. It may be a symptom of what could be a mental health diagnosis. So we can't just sit there and say, that George Santos has some kind of pathological lying as a mental health diagnosis. We cannot diagnose him. We cannot diagnose anybody that we haven't sat down with and we haven't done actual assessments and things like that. Now you could look at somebody, and the hope is this is somebody that you're close with, this is a loved one. You can say, hey, I think that there's something going on, let's see if we can get you a further assessment, or something like that. And so you can look at a website like, Psychology Today is one of the websites that majority of the counselors in this country, and internationally. So if you're an international person watching this, Psychology Today is a place that you can go and you can put in your address, or there are places you can click for international and you can put in the country that you're in, and you can find counselors in your area. You can find counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists all on there, and you can, talk to one of them and say, hey, I've been referred to you. My loved ones are concerned. I'm concerned, something like that. And they'll be able to help you and point you in the right direction to start, getting an assessment. Assessments are needed in order for diagnosis to happen. So you would, enter into a therapeutic relationship with that person, and they would do that assessment for you and then help you further. If you are not able to do all of that, there's a concern somewhat with that. You can go to your general care doctor, your PCP, and then your PCP will refer you to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist, and then they'll help you with that moving forward. But yeah, so pathological lying on its own is not a diagnosis, but it can be a symptom of something else that is going on with a person. And so if you've noticed that somebody is, just lying continuously, and they've been caught in that lie and it's no longer beneficial, it's actually hurting their relationships, then it could be time to to sit them down and say, hey, I noticed that there's something going on. How about, we seek services, and, you can walk alongside that person. And then once they get into services, the professional that they're working with will be able to help them to move along, forward in their journey and be able to create better relationships with the people in their lives. So that is it for me. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful day. If you want more information on where you can seek services, if you want information about anything that I've talked about today, my email is in the description of this video. If you want to maintain your privacy and things like that, you can always send me an email. All right. I hope that you guys are having a wonderful day and you will have a wonderful week and weekend. And I will talk to you guys later. All right. Bye.